towards the end of your assessment, so a perfect moment for me to jump in and have a look at what's going on. Today we're going to talk about a few things in perfectly competitive markets, what to do when you have a monopolist, what is this thing about externality that it's so important. Let's jump right into the game. If you take a look at the situation, I have to say it's always exciting to be here at this point of the assessment. You can see that we've got a few people allocated to this planet and a few people allocated to this planet here. And this happens randomly, and today is the day where I'm going to start talking about why we do that. But let me go to this planet first. And let me show you what's going on. We have all these gray locations which have been claimed by students. And one thing that we can do in order to understand market concentration, in order to understand if someone is in fact having market power in the economy, is to have a look at our heat maps. In particular, let's scroll through these options. You can see here, I'm going to close my window for a second. You can see here that in the mid-market, the GDP or accumulation of profit in the different industry is pretty stable. How about vegetables, workers? You can see here that we have a bit of a disproportionate supply from these two suppliers of workers in the economy. For final consumption from the retirees, similar. Wind is similarly balanced, solar as well, coal, oil, gas. Let's have a look. Okay, gas, interesting. Here we have potentially the rise of a monopolist in this industry, and that's going to be really interesting, and we're going to have a look in a second of how we see this in the game and what could be the impact on society because we have presence of this monopoly. I'm going to just log in, maybe actually next to this monopolist, like just next there. And claim location and have a look at what's going on inside that particular country. You can always refer to the demand and supply graph when you want to know more about energy. You can just check this one and check the energy market and have a look at what's going on in the energy market. You can see here, I'm going to hide the points in the demand and supply that are excluded. It's a little bit easier for me to look at this graph, and I'm going to make it a little bit smaller so I can see all the supply. So in here we can see that we've got quite a few wind producers that are currently supplying wind, and when I'm clicking through them, I think you can see that the Z number here is varying. It's different depending on the point I click, which means that all these points are in fact supplied by different students. And this is really good because this really means that the market is not very concentrated and it resembles a bit the perfectly competitive market. But let's go up the supply curve because these renewable resources will not be always available. There's going to be a point in time when the wind is not blowing. So let's have a look at why we had that concentration in the gas market. And here we are. This is an oil firm. This is a natural gas from this student. Oh, see, that's what I was hoping to see. See that this student is actually responsible for production of these 2 points. Okay, so there is a little bit of the beginning of a market concentration here for gas. And in fact, if I continue, okay, this is actually a different student, and that I think it's all for gas. It looks like there is a little bit of concentration. This is not quite a monopolist. I wouldn't call it a monopoly because it is true that one of the students, which is probably the one that we saw with the big money icon, is responsible for most of the GDP in that market. Still, it's actually well distributed. We have a variety of students participating. What does it mean really that this is not a monopolist? Well, the important thing, the thing to keep in mind, is that a monopolist is able to control the price. So by changing the quantity that a monopolist produces, they can actually affect the equilibrium market price. But if you are in a market like this one, where you have a lot of individual producers producing a little bit, it's very hard for an individual student to actually affect the market price. Just to give you an example, if this student who has somewhat of a concentration of GDP around gas production in the economy, if they decided to stop supplying or decided to supply less, they wouldn't be able to affect the market much. Yes, these 2 points would be gone, and that would probably affect the price a little bit as the energy operator tries to match demand and supply, but you can see that there is just too much supply of energy. This is not a monopolist. We have institutions in Australia that are looking after competition, and they are daily checking the markets to understand if effectively the fact, for example, that certain companies are doing incredibly well, is it because they have market power, or is it because they're simply good at their job? And it's important to distinguish. Here, when I was looking at the globe, it looked like this student might have had a monopoly. They had so much concentration of money in that particular industry, but actually it turns out that they're just probably managing it really well. And you can see why. If you look at renewables, they are the ones with the low marginal cost, represented by these low supply points. And look, this is the gas firms, right? They are very close. They have a relatively low marginal cost of production. They are down here close by to renewable resources. Instead, look at this, for example, gas and oil firms. They're much more inefficient with high marginal costs. So this student is probably just being efficient in the production of gas, and that's all. There is no need in this case for government intervention because the market is fairly competitive. This, of course, does not necessarily apply to all other markets, and I'm going to let you this task for you to do and just check what's going on in the other markets and maybe try to understand if in fact imperfect competition is emerging in these simulations. The other thing that we talk about in this particular week is the concept of pollution. And we have a CO2 tracker here, and we can see that the current level of pollution is 500 units, is going up pretty quickly. And if it reaches 1,000 units, then we are going to have a weather event, a blizzard, that will reduce surplus for everybody in the planet by 15 surplus point. This is a great example of an externality. Think about pollution as the example here, and try to imagine all these producers here. They are producing energy using wind, and then you have this relatively cheap but still polluting industry, this student producing natural gas, energy via natural gas, creating or helping adding to this counter for climate change and pollution. So all these suppliers are green, and then you have this person here who made a lot of money out of this industry, contributing instead to pollution and potentially extreme events tracked by our climate change tracker. This is just to say it's a classic example of an externality, very hard to control, very hard for students here to coordinate and say, hey, you shouldn't do that, or you should pay extra because you're creating a surplus cost to everybody. Difficult to do negotiation. This is a large market. The cost theorem doesn't quite apply. So how do we go about this? Well, individually, each region can impose government measures to reduce their own production of output that is polluting by going into the bank and then government policy. You can introduce taxes on many items, including the energy industry. However, these taxes are only going to apply to your industries, and this is the classic debate we had in Australia about, for example, that carbon tax. A lot of economists are in favor of a carbon tax, but it's difficult politically to apply because in this game, if you apply, for example, a carbon tax to your economy, you're just making your producer less efficient. Well, maybe the other student who doesn't have a tax on pollution, they can continue to make a lot of money and continue to pollute the planet. That's the argument where it's hard to implement a carbon tax, even though it makes perfect sense from a societal perspective. If you have a monopolist, for example, in a market, you may also want to impose taxes or other forms of government policy, as you can see in your textbook. So keep an eye out for imperfect competition situation, externality, and think about whether you should apply government policy. But going back to what I promised I would discuss today, we have two planets here, like this one and this one. And the way we have designed them is that you are randomly assigned to them. So these two groups, because they are randomly assigned, they are kind of made on average of the same type of people. It's like in a pharmaceutical drug trial when you give a placebo to a group that's randomly selected and the actual drug to the other group. These groups are comparable because it was just a toss of a coin that decided the composition, so we can actually compare the two outcomes and see how they vary. And I'm gonna leave this to Jonathan to dig into through the data of this assessment planets, but what we have done here, we have in one of these planets implemented an obligatory carbon tax at the planetary level. So it's a carbon tax that is applied forcefully to everybody in the planet. Whereas the other planet, what we call the control group, doesn't have any forceful carbon tax. Now we have an experiment going on essentially, and we can look at behavior, how behavior changed based on the tax, but also if having a carbon tax improved total surplus in one of these planets relative to the control, and if not, why. This is a lot of food for thought, and that's exactly how research is done in the real world through randomized control trials to actually understand through human behavior how outcomes are realized, and then study how we can make societies better off by implementing policy and rules or strategy around societal issues such as externalities, something that you have seen this week. Very well, if you want to see in which planet I was, so if I return home, let's see, I don't think, no, I don't. If I am in the treatment group with this obligatory carbon tax, I would have seen here a box indicating that there is a tax that I need to pay. In this case, I cannot change planet at this point because I have entered the planet, and so I'm going to stay here until the end. But it is exciting for me to see students coming in, playing, and in some way indirectly contributing to running an experiment where we can study the effect of different policies of very important societal outcomes. Thank you so much for joining me in this PlayDiary. I'm going to see you at the next one. If you have any suggestion for PlayDiaries or things that you would want me to touch on a little more deeply, just let me know. In the meantime, thank you so much for coming. See you very soon at the next one. Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone. See you later. Bye-bye.